Welcome to Life with Legends. Justin Bell here. Apologies for a few weeks off from the podcast. Had to get some things in order, tape some of these new shows, and of course, the car season is well underway, both in terms of racing and the lifestyle, entertainment, Concours collector side of things, which brings me to what I just did last weekend. The Amelia, formerly known as the Amelia Concours d'Elegance, was a spectacular event which I co-hosted. What really brought the weekend to a fantastic close was the fact on Monday I spent the day with Bill Warner at his beautiful new car garage in Jacksonville. Well, Bill is known internationally as the man who founded the Amelia Concours d'Elegance 28 years ago, but he recently sold the whole event to Hagerty so that they might lead it into the next era. But Bill truly was the pulse of the event for so many of us that visited year after year. His encyclopedic knowledge of just not the cars, but the people involved is legendary. He can recall the names of every driver in a certain race, what happened and why. And as someone that can't even remember my own last race, it always blows me away. But the story of Bill's obsession and passion for cars and racing goes back to his extensive career as a top motorsports photographer and writer for Road and Track magazine since 1971. And the images on his walls show that he really was there, right in the heart of the action. Andretti, McQueen, Gregg, Haywood, Derek Bell, everybody you can imagine. Bill is a charming and entertaining raconteur, a successful businessman, and I feel very fortunate to have had this opportunity to catch up with him, and also to call him a great mate. Enjoy. We should be in action. Well, it seems fitting, Bill, that we should be sitting with you on Monday after Amelia Island.
Yeah, this is a lot easier this year.
It was, right?
Yeah.
You're a tourist. You walk around.
Yeah.
I mean, last year must have been the tougher one, right? I mean, we're not talking about those kind of emotions, but I was thinking last year it was probably a bit like when the hot girl you used to date is now with someone else, and you're like walking around going, I used to be, or was it a case of this is the one I used to be married to? Thank God someone else has taken her over.
You're on the right trail. I've been married 56 years to the same lovely lady, but it was somewhat akin to going to an ex-wife's next wedding. I think you could say.
I'm sure it was.
And You sell a man a car, you can paint it pink if he wants to.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah,
I think that's what you said last year. You were like, you bought my car. Do what you want with it. Unfortunately.
Well, I was hoping that, and they wouldn't make many changes, but they're making some good changes. This year was spectacular. I thought they did a very nice job. Last year there were some errors, and I wrote them a 3-page letter and said, "Here's what I think you should do." And then they adapted for it. Not everything, but most everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I thought that it was so lovely, and I think it must be heartwarming. Every dinner, every event, you get acknowledged, but you're not. It's being acknowledged by the people that used to work with you, whether it's Mercedes or whether it's it's really nice that the crowd at the seminars they taught you, because if we go back 28 years. It was probably a modest start to this, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. I did it on a laptop in 90 days the first year. And I called people like Brian Redmond and Peter Brock, who helped me.
Oh, really?
They got me in touch with the people who could make it happen. And the first year was kind of a practice. It was a practice run. We learned a lot in the first year. About the third year, I was looking out there and... let's see, we had Phil Hill, and then we had Carol Shelby, and we had Hurley. And I said, we're honoring these guys. We get as many of their cars as we can from their career. So that's how that started. Doing not only having the honoree there, but celebrating their success with the cars they were successful in.
Did it evolve into the Racers Concours? Because it makes me feel kind of warm inside when people, this is the Racers Concours.
Yeah, well, like you, I was never at the professional level you were. I ran Firehawk and ran one GT race and ran a lot of SCCA stuff. But I liked racing. I started going to the races when I was 14, 15 years old. I worked for a Volkswagen dealer driving a courtesy bus when I was 16. And the owner, A.E. Sager, had 2 race cars, 2 Devon Specials. So I'd go to the races and schlep tires and get coffee. And back then, there was 2 unique things. One, you didn't have to be 18 to get the pits. There were no pits. They just parked in the grass. And the racetracks were generally on old World War II airports, marked with peach baskets. By Sunday, the lap times came down as the peach baskets were moved.
Everything got moved. It's because it was wonderful. Like you could just see with Jeff Gordon this weekend. It's pretty hard to impress a guy like Jeff Gordon, who's ridden the wave of extraordinary fame and wealth as one of the top NASCAR drivers. But when he got there and he saw one of his USAC midgets and one of his Grand National cars, and you could see the look on his face, which you see many times, whether it's Derek Bell, Emerson Fittipaldi, whoever, they all go, wow, there's a lot of work gone into curating this.
There was. Like with Emerson Fittipaldi, we had I think it was a Renault Gordini or something. He drove when he was in Brazil, and he'd never seen it.
I remember that.
And here we got his Formula One cars and Indy cars out there, and he goes straight to this little yellow sedan off on the side. And there were some Brazilian guys there who'd brought it up, and they were all thrilled. That gives me the thrill. See people having a good time.
Yeah.
And it is about nostalgia. It's remembering the great times and forgetting the bad times. I remember Sterling Moss is the only guy we did twice. And that came out of the fact that we were coming up on his 50-year victory at Cuba in the Birdcage Maserati. So I made it a point, got on the internet, found the head of the Cuban Automobile Museum, got the State Department to approve me to go to Cuba, went down to Cuba, met with him. We were looking to see if there's anything left in Cuba from the races. There wasn't, but we got pretty much educated, got to see the old sites, and went by the Lincoln Hotel, saw Fangio's suite, We were trying to get a feel for what Moss would have gone through then. Yeah. And that year, I think we had pretty close to 30 of the cars of his career.
Wow. Let's talk about Sterling for a minute, because, one of the things you have, is this trap-like mind where you have incredible detail in it, but you've also had become friends with some of these
very much
incredible heroes of our sport, legends of our sport, but equally you saw them in period at times. Yeah. So isn't nostalgia when we elevate people, isn't it? It's like when we look back, but he was always a star, wasn't he, Sterling?
He was my hero. I used to, we had an acre lawn that I had to mow with a mower every Saturday morning for my dad. And my dad made me work every Saturday morning till noon. So I learned how to budget my time to end right at noon, Yeah. Otherwise, if I finished too early, he'd make me go dig in the ditch. Well, while I was out there mowing the lawn with a hand mower, I used to fantasize racing against Sterling Moss. He was my hero. Yeah. Of course, Sterling's hero was Fangio. Yeah. Everybody has a hero.
Everybody does, yeah.
But I got to know Sterling and Susie very, very well. And we would visit him when we were in London. And, I mean, it would be like a baseball fan becoming friends with Mickey Mantle and being able to go to his home and have a dinner. I mean, it was wonderful. But
some pinch me moments.
Yeah.
Did he make you tea in the house in London, and you'd shuffle around making you a cup of tea?
No, we went to his favorite restaurant, which was about 2 blocks away off Shepherd's Mews.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have a cup of tea there, but always felt welcome there. And it was an interesting, I guess they call it a flat.
Yeah, it was.
He lived in it for, 60 years?
And do you remember when it was so state of the art at the time, back in the 70s?
Oh, yeah.
He had an elevator goes through the. I mean, he had the food service, didn't he? That kind of went through the place. And I remember he. First time I went to his house, this was actually with my ex-wife, and we went in, and he just went in the bedroom, and he goes, "That's the action light." I mean, that's what he said. He says that to us, and I mean, we walked out, and I was like, Sterling Moss just told you that's where the magic happens.
Well, when he passed away, I think she has never gotten over the loss.
Right?
It's sad, But, over the 26 years that I ran Amelia, I got to be friends with your dad and you. Yeah. And, of course, I knew Brian Redmond from the time he worked here in Jacksonville for a while.
Yeah.
But Carroll Shelby, funny stories on Shelby.
I'd love to know, because Shelby is a guy that he's one of the few who have passed away during my adult lifetime that I didn't know. So.
Yeah. I had a Shelby King Cobra, a Cooper Monaco with a 289 Ford V8 and a Kaladi T37 gearbox. I bought it out of a South Carolina junkyard and restored it. It was a terrible car. I mean, I drove it 3 times to get out in a cold sweat. I said, this thing's for sale before it kills me. And one day, evidently someone was interviewing him about the cars he built. Well, he didn't really know how many cars he built or what he built. Phone rang one night about 9 o'clock. Bill, Shelby here. I said, oh, what's up? He says, how many of those damn cars I built? I said, you built 8. Thank you. That was the phone call. The other phone call was from Innis, Ireland, and he and I did work together on some articles for Thoroughbred and Classic. Then we drove together at Nelson Ledges in a Jack Roush car. So that I would have liked to have had him as an honoree, because boy, he was a storyteller.
Yeah.
One night he called. He used a terminology I'd never heard before, and I answered the phone, and it was like 9 o'clock at night in Jacksonville, which would have been 2 o'clock in the morning in London.
Yeah.
I hear Ennis go, Bal. I said, Ennis here. I said, oh, Ennis, what's up? He says, I'm here with a bird with big bristles, and we have an argument over whether Savannah's in Georgia or Florida. I said, Savannah's in Georgia, Ennis. Thank you. Boom, hung up. I don't know who won the bet. But a bird with big bristles, do you know what that is?
Oh, I know. So if you have big bristles, it's you Linda Vaughan over there in the picture, she had big bristles, as Ennis would have said.
I understand now.
It took you a while, but it's code for something. It was. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Do you? Because that's why I love doing this podcast, and I get Dad, telling me stuff, and people are, especially if there's a widow, they don't say so much. If there's more, but of course, there's always been 2 books that should have been written, right, about every drive you've ever known. There's the one that really can't be written until they're long gone,
of course,
but they need to tell it.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that's written while they're alive. But I met Jackie X and Dad 2 years ago. We were having dinner at Petit Le Mans at the Hotel de France, and that's what kicked off this podcast.
Great place to stay.
And Jackie's like, Derek, it's a good thing we had no social media, when we were young, because it was a wide open, full throttle world, wasn't it?
It was.
It was dangerous. There were girls around. There was tobacco sponsors. The cars were ridiculously fatal if you crashed.
It was a different world.
What was that era? The 60s, the 70s, the spirit of like pioneering adventure. I mean, you were there.
Yeah. Well, the stories about Maston Gregory. He'd never be strapped in a car. He would attempt to jump out before the collision. He'd stand up in the seat and jump out. I don't know how he did it, but these guys they lived life like a warrior. It was like it could be gone tomorrow, so we're going to live today.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a different time. Today it's very sterile. I think it's very corporate. Everything's structured. Yeah. It used to be. If I went to Watkins Glen, I could see Jackie Eakes. I could see James Hunt walk up. Everything was going on. They didn't have these huge compounds that were isolated with guards dressed in black with dark glasses, ready to break your neck if you tried to get in. Le Mans has become that.
Very much.
I used to love to go to Le Mans, and you'd walk down behind the pits and the paddock and walk in wherever you wanted to go. Last time I went there, they had every major corporation had walls up and guards at the door, and then if you wanted to go down the pit road, they had a pit walk with they'd get thousands of people jammed in a corner, and you had 20 minutes to walk up and down the pits. It's taken all the personality out of it. It's all corporate.
Oh, corporate, yet at its heart, the drivers, I still believe they're doing it. Yes, they have different motivations, maybe when they're young, because their parents spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on karting, and they get in, and so they're already over-invested by the time the kid either makes it or breaks it. But the drivers, I know a lot of them, and they still have that twinkle in their eye about driving fast cars. You know,
there's a difference. I had a nice talk with Patrick Long the other night.
Yeah.
And I saw him. I was in a race at Monterey, and he was in front of me in a 2-liter 911. Just dusted everybody. Just blew them away. Made that car dance. You know, when you're going real fast in an old car and the tires are skinny, that car kind of dances. Well, he had it dancing. And he's talking about, he says, you know, those cars were fun. Nowadays, these modern day cars, huge brakes. You dive in the corner, you throw the anchor out. ABS, they don't lock up.
Yeah.
Paddle shift, boom, boom, boom.
Can't screw up a shift.
You can't.
No.
And so it has taken a lot of the talent to be fast out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe this isn't a good analogy, but digital photography has made everybody a photographer.
Yeah. I think it's a good analogy.
And the modern day race car has made everybody a race driver.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the level of the again, if you have 10 drivers in one car, there'll be one or two that are faster than the others because they just know how to take it to the next level.
You just hit something, though. You have 10 drivers in a car. You go to the 24-hour race, they'll not have 5 drivers. They'll sell seats. In the old days, 2 drivers, right? Mm-hmm. Derek Bell and Al Holbert.
Yep. Just
24 hours in a 962.
Dig in.
What happens is, I think, it's economics.
Yeah.
A lot of times they sell the rides. You know, if they could sell 10 rides on the roof, they would.
Yeah, a lot of the teams would in GTD. But you experienced this lifestyle with a camera in your hand, and that gave you another perspective on it because you become aware of detail that the casual observer doesn't see. I think when you have the lens.
Well, I did a book called The Other Side of the Fence. And that title came from my late sister, who I lost to cancer, and she taught me photography. And when they gave me a camera, I got my camera at 16. She said, you know what that'll get you? And I said, no, what? She says, on the other side of the fence, meaning you got the press pass, and you got access. And having access gave me the opportunity to really get close to what was going on and what was happening, see the inside, not all the inside stories, but you were closer to it than the guy on the outside of the fence,
totally.
You know? And but that's changed, too. You know, I used to go to Sebring, and I'd take my Chevy Suburban, and I'd get all the other photographers, and the press officer would give me a pass, and we'd drive around the road on inside the fence, and I'd get the photographers. I'd say, we're going down to, you know, the Green Park chicane. We get off there, and when y'all are ready to go, come on back to the van, and I'd take them around, and I'd shoot some, and they'd shoot some. It was a fraternity.
Yeah.
Now you go down there, you got to have gray vest with red piping or gray vest with yellow piping, or you can go here, you can't go there, you can't go to this fence, can't shoot there. Daytona's even worse. Yeah. I used to have some great vantage points.
Did you have like your favorite place, like the photograph you just showed us, past the flag, car on the bank?
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been your spot, right?
Can't shoot that anymore.
Oh.
Because the fences are so high.
Yeah.
You can't get the angle you want. The other one is, at Daytona, what we call the hole in the wall. It was about a 4-foot long, 1-foot high hole cut in for photographers, and it was at turn 4 coming through NASCAR, and you had cars going 200 miles an hour, less than 6 feet away from you. And if you had a hat on, they'd just take your hat off when they went by, and it was an explosion. But you'd get these great shots of the NASCARs stacked up.
Yeah.
And they took that away. That was probably a wise thing to do, because if a car got in the fence, you're going to get killed. They'd let 3 of us up at a time, and we had an agreement. If something happens, drop flat behind the concrete. Put your faith in the concrete wall. There's a photo on the wall back there I showed you when I was at Watkins Glen, standing at a guardrail outside turn 1, 2, coming up the hill. And Johnny Rutherford was running Formula 5000 that year, I think in a Hogan car, Lola. And sometimes photographers know when a driver's in trouble before the driver knows he's in trouble.
Yeah.
I think so.
You could start to see the car.
Oh, I saw the car twitch. I said, I'm out of here, because I'm standing where it's going to hit.
Yeah.
So the wire service got a picture of me running, and I'm about maybe 30 yards away from the impact, with the car impacting and exploding. God bless Johnny. He hit engine first. If he'd gone in front first, we wouldn't have Johnny Rutherford today. Well, a piece of the car flew over my head, So, racing can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Oh.
Dangerous for everyone. I mean, photographers, when Alan McNeish went over the wall at Le Mans.
Yeah.
I mean, someone got hurt, or I think dead did. You know what I mean? It's these things in today's era. It's wild. I was on a call with Michelin the other day, and at the end of a feature I did for them at Daytona, I said, and this is the best damn sports car racing in the world. Now, 2 agencies, 9 people decided I shouldn't have said that, so I had to cut it out. And I said, it is ironic, though. I can't stop myself on these conference calls. I said, it's ironic because you're talking about you have tires on cars going over 200 miles an hour where in any 1 second of the race someone can die.
Yeah.
And they're on your tires. And you're worried about me saying damn.
Yeah.
And they went, I know. That's how it goes. And isn't that crazy now? It's like the tolerance for any of that has gone.
Political correctness run amok. But these cars today are probably as safe. They're safer than they've ever been.
Yeah.
Are they? There's one thing you can't make safe, and this comes back to an accident. I had an accident in a club race where a guy spun in front of me, and I violated the rule of go where he's at. He won't be there when you get there. And he came back across the track, and I T-boned him. Well, my sternum broke from my heart coming forward.
Yeah, the human body cannot take.
It cannot take those G's. So you strap them in and keep them insulated in a pod.
Yeah.
But deceleration will still kill him. Neil Bonnet died from that. What happens is your heart's like on a bungee cord.
Yeah.
And it ripped his aorta loose.
But wasn't that Earnhardt too?
They are always quiet about how he died. They talk about the basal skull fracture.
Because he was so slow. Ray told me I did the podcast with Ray Evanham last week, and he just said, Jeff said at the dinner, you go past Senior, and he'd be sitting there in like almost an armchair with his arm up on the side. He was so loose in the car.
Well, I don't know if it's true. What I heard was he had a tendency to loosen his harness on yellow flag laps. To kind of move around in the car. And they had 3 laps to go. And he probably just said, what the heck, 3 laps, I'll just go. I don't know if that's the truth or not.
So do I.
But he wasn't secure in the harness. And then they tried to blame it on Bill Simpson, and it wasn't Simpson's fault. No. And then the drivers who were, I'm not going to wear one of those Hans devices. Only sissies wear Hans devices. Yeah, well, they all have them now.
Yeah.
And we had one of Jeff Gordon's cars stored here last week, and I was looking at the safety measures, the seats, the side pods. I mean, they can't see anything. They got to have spotters, which is good. Yeah. But it's a whole different world from what it used to be.
I mean, they have big wrecks upside down. I mean, when one goes, they all go, and you look at the crash and go, "There's no way people are walking out of that." Formula One, no way they're walking out. But I mean,
Grosjean. I thought he was a crispy critter.
I mean, not a chance. And did you see there was a video on Instagram? Of a reenactment. They did a full simulation of what actually happened when he went through the barrier. And without the halo, there's nothing left. He split the barrier, and it went in that gap in the middle of a barrier, and it opened up, and he went through it.
He's very lucky because that's Helmut Marko. No, not Helmut Marko. Helmut Koenig died at Watkins Glen in a Formula One car when he went between the Armco. That decapitated him. Yeah. And the same thing happened, I think, with who drove with Jackie Stewart? A guy with the beautiful blue eyes. Sever.
Yeah.
Same thing, decapitated.
Yeah. I mean,
they've improved the barriers. They've really done a good job of making racing safer, but they're still not going to take the G-forces out of it.
What the human body can handle. So you were there, you were on site. What for you, in terms of being proximity to that danger, do you remember anything that stands out to you? I mean, you knew them as friends.
Yeah.
Whose death affected you the most?
That's a good question. Let me think about that for a minute.
Okay, come back to that.
Because I was. I tell you what it was. There was two deaths, and it was early in my life when I was a kid.
Okay.
Bill Vukovich.
Oh, wow.
He was my hero.
Okay.
The Mad Russian.
Yep.
And he died at the 1955 Indy 500. Burned in the car, upside down. I swore I'd never go to a race again. I was a kid.
Yeah.
How old was I? 55. 12 years old.
Yeah.
That was a big one. Bill Vukovich.
And you're at the track. I mean, there's smoke rising in the air. I mean, everybody on site knew something tragic had happened.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Changes in an instant. We've all been at a racetrack when suddenly the news gets around, and it's something that was a festival of excitement and enjoyment is suddenly changed in an instant.
I was at the 73 Indy 500, which was probably the most tragic Indy 500 round. You know, the mechanic was run over in the pits when the ambulance went in the wrong direction. Swede Savage died. It was just a disaster day. It poured rain. It was my first Indy 500, and this was 73. So in 72, if you remember, the manufacturers were in a recession, and they had a hard time getting pace cars, someone to supply pace cars. So a Dodge dealer in Indianapolis named Eldon Palmer said, "I'll supply Dodge Challengers if you let me drive the pace car." That was a deal. So all month long, he tested, driving the pace car, driving the pace car, driving the pace car. So the day of the race, crowds are there, everything's exciting. Like you said, there was an electricity in the air, and he comes down pit road and misses his mark. He's not a professional driver.
Yeah, of course.
They put a sign there, "Stop here, Eldon." He whistles right by it, crashes the Challenger into the photo stand. Now, at Indy, they used to have a 3-tiered photo stand on a flatbed.
Yeah.
They roll it up into pit road. You could shoot the start, and then they'd roll it out of the way because it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? So, 73, I decide I'm going to be on the stand for the start. And my friend Pete Byro, who used to shoot for Car and Driver, wonderful guy. He's walking by and he looks at me and says, "Boy, you're brave." I said, "They're not going to hit it 2 years in a row. I mean, it's just not going to happen. This is the safest place on the track." Well, that's the year that Salt Walther got into the wall. And I got a photo of him upside down. The wheel caught on one of the poles and ripped the whole side pod out. People at Indy used to sit behind a wall narrower than this table you and I are sitting at. And the cars were on the other side, and they're sitting there turned with their shoulder to the back, or their back to the wall, and unignited methanol is in a foam cloud going over them.
Holy shit!
Yeah, man, I said that was dangerous. So I look up, and here comes Salt Walther upside down, front of his car off, his feet sticking out the front of it, and it's sliding towards the stand. I'm saying, I think Byro was right. What am I doing here? And Hobbs came down on the inside and clipped him, and the car kept going down the straight. If it hadn't been for David Hobbs, the car would have gone into the photo stand again, or close to it. And you could feel the heat coming off the alcohol. You couldn't see the flames because they're alcohol.
Yeah.
But you could feel the heat. So, yeah, that was a bad time. The other time, I don't know the driver's name, but when I was a kid, after World War II, my sister used to have pen pals with a young girl in England. And we'd send packages over to England, and they'd send us back stuff. And she sent us a magazine. And there was a guy, a driver in Dunrod, I think it was.
Okay.
And he got in an accident, and this is well before fuel cells or anything. And the car caught fire, and they got a whole sequence of him burning to death. And that affected me badly, too.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'll never do this. I'll never drive a race car. But then there's something that goes on in your mind that says, that's the other guy, right?
Never gonna happen.
Never going to happen to me.
No. Yeah, I always, I mean, that's those. It's funny, those moments that catch you, isn't it? Because I remember Sterling saying, we'd head out, you'd be in the bar the night before and chatting up, as he says, some piece of crumpet, and the next day you'd be going out there, but you truly didn't know whether you were going to be there the next night.
No, so enjoy
it, and he did. I mean, they did. But that proximity to the danger and the risk, but it was always the other guy.
Always the other guy, yeah. One time I was at Savannah, Georgia, and I was talking to my wife Jane. I said, I'm gonna get a car and go racing, and she wasn't really enamored with that idea. And all of a sudden, there were cars crashing at the start-finish line. This is Rolling Road. And it turns out the photographer, Hal Crocker, had been inside turn one behind some 55-gallon drums. Yeah. And some guy in a Formula Atlantic car had a diabetic seizure, went off the road, hooked the wheel, spun around, hit Crocker, knocked him, 20 yards, broke about every bone in his body. And I'm thinking, no matter what you do in this sport, there's going to be danger somewhere.
Yeah.
You got to look out for yourself.
Yeah.
Whether you're driving the car or
Yeah.
you're a journalist or anything. Journalists are probably safer. They get fed and step up and stay up in the press box. But no, it's dangerous. And to the current sanctioning body's credit, they're trying to make it safer for those participating. I seem to think that many of these racing organizations do no longer care about still photography. Everything's TV, everything's instant. So, and it's now turned corporate. If you shoot, you got to sign a release that 15% of the revenue goes to the track, and you got to get their permission, and you don't own this and you don't own that. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm out of it.
Yeah, I mean, what point? How did the transition to getting actually paid to be there on site with a camera? I mean, in those days, was it, hey, give me a shot? I mean, who gave you the shot?
Well, there were a lot of people who'd give their work away to get a photo credit.
Okay.
But it never paid much.
No.
Most I ever got paid, William Jeans, who used to be the editor of Car and Driver and publisher of Road and Track, he and I went to the first Retro Le Mans. And he negotiated for me, and I got like $2,500. I never was paid $2,500. I did a job, a corporate job one time, $750 a day, and this was back in the 70s. But I couldn't put my family through that.
No.
I had a little company on the side selling filtration equipment, which paid the bills.
Yeah.
I
mean, you have to, right? I mean, but it gave you that access.
I did.
It gave you that knowledge.
Yeah.
Did you find that, well, as someone that is an amateur photographer that loves it, and I take my little Leicas at the racetrack and I get up close, and I carry those cameras for a reason, because people still let you get close with those cameras. Yeah. In your era, pre-social media, pre the fact that you could just upload everything, they let you get let you get close, or was there still a little bit of reservation? Because I know in the rock world, the musicians, there's great pictures of, which we all love, of Mick Jagger, snorting cocaine in the hotel room. Someone was there taking that shot with a little film camera.
You remember the movie Le Mans?
Yeah, of course.
The journalist photographer in the movie was meant to be obnoxious, I think. They wrote him into being obnoxious. Yeah. And I thought that reflected what the producers thought of photographers. And then there was that one scene in Grand Prix when the great Sarti gets killed and his girlfriend runs up with bloody hands screaming at the photographers, If there was something really bad happening, I stayed away from it. I didn't think it was in my purview to record that.
But not everyone feels that.
No, there's the the side that people want to record the sadness of it.
Yeah.
Robert Bailey wrote a book called The Cruel Sport.
Yeah.
And I think that that book pretty much defined Formula One back in the 50s, late 50s. From a photographer's standpoint, I thought the best book ever written on photography was done by Horst Baumann, called The New Matadors. He had a real eye, more so than anybody else. There were some great photographers out there like Jesse Alexander, who was there, and they were good technicians. I call these people technicians. Yeah. The shot is sharp, it's focused, the tonal range is perfect. But that's about all you can say for it. Yeah. And then there's people like Biro, who I love like a brother. He was one of the most talented guys around. And their eye was different. They saw things differently. In Horst Baumann's book, there's this wonderful shot from Monaco of the car coming out of the garage from vertically above, looking down on this Formula One car. And the driver's looking up, and standing there is a beautiful lady with a parasol.
What a shot!
A great shot. And he quit when he was at Indy when they were still burning gasoline and had that huge fire. I think that killed Eddie Sachs. And he got so fed up with racing, he went away. It was too emotional for him. Yeah. And if someone you know gets killed in a race car, it really impacts your enthusiasm. Sometimes you just swear, I'm never doing this again. But then you do. I don't know what to tell you. It's intoxicating.
I see that. I saw that firsthand when I didn't understand it when Stefan Beloff died, because I was at the Nürburgring with Dad. He was in the sister car, Jackie. He tried to overtake. His Dad'll talk about Stefan with, he just thought the kid was amazing, right? But as he said, someone should have tried to slow him down. You don't need to overtake. You don't need to be 5 seconds quick. You don't need to be you don't need a second quick or whatever. You don't need to overtake Jackie XA. He was destined for world championship Formula One status. He was
when Gilles Villeneuve got tangled with Jochen Mass.
Yeah,
an accident. Jochen's lived with it his whole life. And it was just a racing thing that happened.
Yeah.
A life was lost.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Don't you find it funny that many, many other sports don't have the component of death in them?
Yeah.
Now, pro football last year had the guy with a heart attack on the field. But you hardly hear of anybody playing baseball or basketball.
No. There's freak accidents. You're not standing in the way of the truck coming down the highway. Those are accidents. Freaks. We live in a sport where back then, Dad said 11 guys in 1 year. You went to 11 funerals. I mean, Sterling would say you went to funerals. I'm glad that's over now, but it is. I think there's a side of it that your generation must go. We're not protecting us. We have no protection against disaster now. When dear old Dan Weldon died, an entire grid had never experienced someone die, and it was shocking to everyone, from Dario to Gilles.
It was destined to happen. They bring in this guy from the rodeo circuit. He's going to be the new marketing guy. They do an inverted start on a very, very short, tight, high-speed course. It was going to happen.
Yeah.
And no one said anything about the danger of that happening. No. And that's criminal.
That's cool, and obviously tragic, and you see the effect it had. But let's talk about more cheerful stuff. You also witnessed to some of the, I always find I'm intrigued by the fatality side of things and the way the drivers went through it. And I've talked to everybody about the drivers about how they manifested that. I will go back 1 second. So when I was 18, Stefan died. Yeah. I was like, why, Dad? Why the hell are you still racing? When I started racing and Paul Warwick died, and I was part of the Camel program. I was in my Vauxhall Lotus. He's in the Formula 3000 at Alton Park. I'm wearing the same shirt as him, so I went and squeezed his hands on the grid, and I remember him doing that. Then the kid's dead. And then 10 days later, we're all at a funeral. David Brabham, me, and obviously his helmet's coming by on top of the coffin, and I'm like, we're all in tears. And then you walk away and you say, see you Thursday.
And that's the truth.
I mean, that was it. We had to what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Reset and get going.
I once asked Jim Rathman, we had him up here one time, and when the Daytona Speedway opened, they decided to have an IndyCar race. Well, they'd never had an IndyCar race on a 2.5-mile high bank oval. And George Amick got killed in that race when the car went upside down, and he got thrown out, and he was decapitated when the car hit him. The car came down on him. And Rathman, I said, Jim, at Indy, you were lapping in the 140s, You get to Daytona in the same car on the same tire, and now you're doing 172 miles an hour. I said, what was through your mind? He says, we'd come off NASCAR 4 or NASCAR 2 onto the back straight. Nose would float. And then the car would kind of take a bite, and he'd go on. I said, well, why did you do it? He says, that was my job.
Yeah.
I was getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
That's how I made my living.
Yeah.
So I can see it from that angle.
Yeah.
The risk reward being,
right there.
a good life, a famous life. That's the reward, and the risk is you don't get to enjoy that famous life.
No. I know. I do believe. Well, you've driven now. You've raced so much, and I guess
Unsuccessfully.
But you still feel that it's still the same drug. It's still the same
yeah.
feeling. At its core, it doesn't matter what car, whether what car anyone's driving. It's got. I always think that no matter what level, there's that just instinctive, tactile, visceral connection to something that isn't you. It's not a horse. It's you control it. Did you talk about your driving side? Did it make you a better photographer, by the way? Do you think understanding how cars felt, how the drivers moved?
I don't know. I really don't.
I'd bet you it did.
I tell you one thing it did do. Although most of my time were in showroom stock cars.
Yeah.
I did one GT race, and then in vintage I had some sports racers. Brabham BT8, nice car.
Yeah.
Vintage racing should be a celebration of the car, not a race.
Yeah.
But I was the recipient of General Motors support when I ran, and I found in doing the Concours, I find that racing is a fraternity. In many cases, they don't care if you drove Formula One or showroom stock.
Mm-hmm.
You're a member of the team, which means you strapped yourself in the car and you went out and you did the best you could. And I raced against some guys. I raced against John Andretti. Bob Aiken and I drove together a couple of times. Jack Baldwin and I drove. You could race against the pros, and they would represent the benchmark for you.
Yeah.
They were the target you were to get. With Baldwin, we'd go to Watkins Glen, and he'd always be a second and a half faster than I was, and I'd try to beat it, and I couldn't get it. So it's kind of like a duffer playing with Arnold Palmer. You at least you had a chance to benchmark your own talent.
Yeah. I agree with that, 100%. I mean, it's just. It was when people come up and tell me they do some club racing and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, it means nothing compared to you." I go, "But that's the race you're in." I mean, it's when people say
I couldn't afford anything. I was paying for it myself.
Yeah, exactly. Which is anathema to someone like me.
Yeah.
Who's never paid to go racing, but you go, "Wow, yeah." I mean, it's like I tell people when they're wanting to go club racing, and I said, just don't drink the Kool-Aid too much. If you're doing whatever, it's about having fun for the money, and just getting into GTD and saying you want to do Daytona and spend $300,000 on one race isn't going to necessarily give you more fun.
No.
But if that's your life goal to do the Rolex, then you should do it.
Well,
but don't bet the farm on it, because there's no money coming your way.
I was injured 3 times in the 24-hour. The first one was one I ended up in a crash at Sebring and was in the hospital, so I couldn't do that one. The second one, I was going to do it with Toli Aratunov and a Lancia Stratos with George Drolsom, who was a pretty good driver. He won the American Porsche Cup. And someone left a rag in the sump, and it fried the engine, which turned out to be a blessing. George got out of the car, and I was going to get in. He says, "It's trying to kill me."
That's funny. You're like, well.
So it didn't get in that one. The third one, I was going to drive in a Mazda RX-7. The guy said, "Oh, by the way, if something happens to the car, it's yours." I said, "What do you mean it's mine?" He said, "Oh, you pay for it." I said, "What if I'm going into NASCAR 1 going up on the banking and a fuel line blows loose and sprays the car with fuel and it ignites and burns to the ground? Whose car is it?" "You're in it, it's yours." I said, no, I'm not doing that.
I don't want to take that one on. Is obviously the flip side of all this is, especially back in the day, and I do maintain that some of the drivers still do enjoy this way of life, but the camaraderie was huge.
Yes.
Off track and on track. You traveled as a circus. They got to know you. You were part of it. And drivers did have fun. I mean, sex was free. Everything was around.
Well,
not free
for
for
me.
you. Not for you, Bill. You might have had to pay, but
Not that either.
No, you were married. No, but I mean, that was an interesting. You're married on the road when everyone else is. The shenanigans were legendary.
Oh yeah. Well, not necessarily where we were. Mostly we're married folks who were guys who wanted to be real race drivers and was doing club stuff, but. We did have a certain group that would gravitate together at every race. We'd paddock together. And
no, I mean, following the big racing.
Oh, yeah.
When you follow the as you say, fame and danger, it's a pretty intoxicating mix.
Oh, it is.
I mean, who is like, that's it. I mean, what did Jackie Stewart say? He said, Francois, he did some damage. That's what he was talking about. He said, because the ladies loved him. I mean,
well, I know some stories, but I can't tell them.
Oh, gosh, you have to. You can't tease me like that. Make them unnamed. No.
Pedro Rodriguez, that's one name.
Oh yeah. I've heard that. Yeah, but I mean, it was a pioneering frontier. I mean, driving these crazy cars.
But on the other side, you had like Brian Redmond.
Married
he
all
was,
the way through.
and Marion was his support, and he was Mr. Right all the way through.
All the way through. No,
Yeah.
and there are better people than others out
Yeah.
there.
Well, I don't know if it's better or worse, but there one who are more, should we say, dedicated to their family life.
Yeah,
and their
exactly.
family. Yeah.
Who was the guy that you? I mean, irrespective of like the naughtiest, but who were the big personalities for you? The ones that you just could see fill the room. Like there's drivers like Hurley who are always the quiet ones in the corner, and Brian is one of the best raconteurs in the world. David Hobbs.
Well,
again,
Hobbs is
Hobbs
bigger than get Hobbs and Redmond together and give them a bottle of bourbon, and the evening's over. Hobbs is funny. I met him in '69 when he was running. He just came over to run Formula 5000.
Yeah.
Came over to do that, and I was doing a story for Road and Track. And I think his sponsor at that time, second year, was Castrol, but he had such a sense of humor, and he was a family man.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, dedicated to his family. His job was racing.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, Mike Bailey at Coca-Cola did a trade out. They'd run a Coca-Cola brand on a BMW 3-liter CSL, and he and Benny Parsons would drive the car in a 24-hour. In exchange, Hobbs would drive a Chevelle in the 500, a Coca-Cola Chevelle. So he'd never done NASCAR racing, so I went down during his practice just to see how it was. And he goes, first of all, put the car through tech, and it won't pass tech. But it was Benny set up the car. And Benny came and says, David, you didn't come out. I was going to lead you around. He says, Gazaway wouldn't pass the car. So Benny took the car, got it passed. First, if you were an alien Brit coming into NASCAR, you weren't going to get any break at all. No. So he finally goes out, and he pulls in, and mechanic goes over to him, how is it? And David says, I think there's something wrong with the diff. I said, diff? What the hell's a diff? He says, the differential. The guy said, oh, you mean the rear end. and I said, David, you got to learn how they talk about it here. They talk about push.
Yeah.
They talk about loose. They don't talk about oversteer and understeer.
Hunting like a dog.
Yeah, hunting like a dog. And then so we sat around one afternoon, had a few beers, and we were going through this. I said, you got to learn how to say ma, ca, run. Real good, and you got to stretch out that reel. So he got pretty good at that, and we always laugh about that today. But I think that was his. Every driver at that time, there was cross pollination. Dan Gurney could be driving a Ford Mark IV at Le Mans one week, the Eagle Formula One car in Belgium the next week, and winning, and go to Riverside and drive a Chevy. And
or they just never stopped driving.
Jim Clark drove stock cars. Ennis drove a stock car. Vic Elford drove a stock car. One year, Jackie Oliver did the whole season because they needed an FIA driver for points in NASCAR. I don't know how that worked. It was some sort of a deal. So there's this cross-pollination between the drivers and the sanctioning bodies. Yeah. But now, could you see Verstappen saying, "I'm going to drive the Daytona 500"? I mean, the Formula One
never happened.
It never happened.
I mean, that's what I loved about Alonso coming into Daytona.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
he's driven everything.
He still wants to.
Yeah.
He was a legitimate part of his life. And seeing him there in the Konica Minolta car, I mean, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I love that when we see drivers from different disciplines. But Jackie said to me, Stuart, he said, you didn't make enough money, so he said we had to drive everything.
Yeah.
And he was the master at making money. Wasn't he? But he
took it to a whole different level.
Yeah.
And both safety and money.
Yeah.
And Brian Redmond once told me when he was driving for Porsche or John Wyer, $917,000 a race. Phil Hill told me he's getting $500 a race back in the 50s. And he had to pay for his own transportation. I mean, Ferrari was cheap.
Cheap. When I interviewed Jackie though for this, and we were sitting there at his house in near outside London, his version of the story, I said to Dad, he's like, and I was only getting $5,000 or $10,000. I'm going, Dad, you told me you were getting $500 for with the same. He knew how to do it right from the beginning. That was his job. What was if there was one moment, what was the greatest sight you saw a driver do? What was the race? What was the when you go, because we've all had this. For me, it was Mika Häkkinen in the wet round the out. I mean, I was in the race and Vauxhall Lotus. He went round the outside of Alan McNeish and I in the rain, twitching away like that. And I'm going, he's going to fall off. Well, maybe he isn't. And he disappeared in his. And I, in my heart, said that I could never do that. That I saw, but. Just as a photographer, maybe, standing there, what was that moment you go,
1970 Sebring.
Okay.
Everybody was there. Porsche was there. You had the Gulf cars. Just Penske was there with the 512. Alfa Romeo was there with Diadimich and with Vic Elford in the T33s. I mean, Matras with Dan Gurney and Jack Brabham.
Yeah.
Everybody was there. But also Steve McQueen and Peter Revson in a 2-3-year-old 908, right? Yeah. Well, the race goes along, and Rodriguez ran into Donahue intentionally, and the Alphas, the perception was the Alphas were never going to make it. The Matras broke, everything. So we get down to the last hour. Who's leading the race? Peter Revson and Steve McQueen in a 2-year-old non-factory car.
Yeah.
So the only Ferrari left was driven by Nino Vaccarella and Ignazio Gionti. And I think it was Mauro Faggieri grabbed Andretti, who had been in one of the other 512s, and quit and says, get in this car, you will win. We cannot have an actor win this race. And he drove like a madman. And I think if you ask Mario today what was his greatest endurance race, it would be that one. I mean, it literally came down to within 15 minutes into the race, he finally caught Revson. To take nothing away from Steve McQueen, as a good driver, Revson was terrific.
Was he really?
Yeah, he carried the ball on that race.
Yeah.
But
Mario was in a different place that day.
Yes.
To go.
Don't you know? You've gotten in the zone, haven't you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And you've had times where you couldn't find the zone, right?
Well, no, most of the time, actually. But
yeah, I think he was in the zone.
Yeah.
He just drove the wheels off that 512. It was the only win for Ferrari that whole year. But I was at the finish with the right camera, the right strobe, the right film at the right time. When they put him up on the top of the car and the mechanics got the trophy in the air and Moet's being poured and it was a lucky shot. I just pushed a button. I didn't pre-focus. I didn't just
you knew you had to go.
Yeah.
You had to do your thing.
Got one shot.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah, I saw it. What was the I love the end of a race, especially a sports car race, because I think all our emotions are heightened. You're irrationally emotional.
Yeah.
Like I said on that Corvette seminar, whatever role you played, from a fan to a driver, engineers, teams, you're so tired, you're so beat up, so that the emotions of that final hour are heightened, I think.
Yeah.
But I love seeing the race unfold, and if there is a chase to the finish, which we got to give IMSA credit. The BOP, regardless whether you're on the up or the down, every race goes to the end, to the last few laps.
Look at LMP2 this year.
Look, I mean, it's
after
everything.
24 hours.
And that's thanks to the dreaded BOP, really. I mean, but also getting your lap back. Dad won Le Mans by 5 laps before. Now that can never happen because you get your lap back under yellow, which is a real bummer when you're the one in the lead.
Well, it is. We used to, in NASCAR, when I covered NASCAR races, we used to call it the Buddy Arrington flag. Buddy Arrington would always bring out a yellow so Richard could get his lap back. And we'd all bet within the last 10 laps what lap the yellow was going to come out, because NASCAR did not want a runaway. And you talked to Ray Evernham. I'm sure he told you about Bill France saying, you don't get any more than 2 seconds. if you do, you're going to be called in.
Well, yeah.
That was when Jeff Gordon was driving, and Jeff stretched out, and he got a phone call to the pits. I said 2 seconds. If you look at the sign, if you go to the Daytona Speedway, the sign says a sports entertainment corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a Concours d'Elegance can be like that. You're in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
You want people to come back because they had fun. And in racing, they want to come back because, although it may be contrived to a point, they're experiencing a magic moment.
Yeah.
But then you look at the crash that Ryan Newman had when he had the race in the bag. He got tapped from behind. To me, I don't mean this to be, I do mean it to be criticism. NASCAR has gotten, particularly with the Daytona 500, everybody goes out and tries to keep the nose clean for 450 miles, maybe 460 miles, maybe 470 miles. I remember hearing on my radio one time, Ward Burton always sounded like he had a mouthful of marbles, so you could recognize me. He said, well, boys, we're going to be out here. We're going to go 450 miles and race 50. So it's become like a basketball game. You watch the tip-off, you go to the refrigerator, you get a beer, make sure your wife wakes you up with 10 laps to go.
Exactly.
That's NASCAR.
Yeah.
Is it right? Is it wrong? They always talk about it, like Talladega and Daytona, about the big one. You know you're going to have a big one.
Mm-hmm.
In the last few years, the big ones have been in the last 2, 3, or 4 laps.
Totally.
And now the finishes are almost anticlimactic.
Yeah. Managing that entertainment is the challenge for us in motorsports.
Yeah.
And in motorsports, particularly outside Formula One. I mean, you couldn't have imagined Formula One was going to go to its giddy heights it is now.
Drive to Survive.
That's it.
Boy. And now NASCAR is having a program. What they're doing is the average Joe turns on the TV, he sees a bunch of jelly beans running around.
Yeah.
Red ones, green ones, white ones, the guy wins. But this Drive to Survive takes the personality and creates an interest in an individual. Whether it's Verstappen, whether it's Perez, tells their story. They got a face, they got a family. Now people see it, and now they have an interest.
Yeah.
And I think that's been magnificent.
But it's helped us all.
Oh, yeah.
It has created an unrealistic expectation of what these other shows can do. Because, I said it yesterday. It's like the tribute Rolling Stones band is not as good as the real one. It's like Top Gear America was always crap compared to Top Gear UK. Drive to Survive is the only one that will ever be any good like that for one simple reason. I mean, NASCAR only has a certain number of drivers. Sports cars, we have 200.
Mm-hmm.
That's 200 helmets. That's 200 people and lives. But I do believe that if you can make people fall in love with the personalities, then
you've sold them.
Or hate them. Tony Stewart or Kurt Busch. There were a lot of people that didn't like those guys.
Darrell Waltrip.
But Darrell Waltrip. But it made for great rivalry. But one of the things is, talk about the evolution of the collector car market quickly and those things. Because when you started, it's so funny it's ironic to me because, especially from the race car side of things, no one collected race cars back in the day. You could pick them up anyway.
They were throwaways.
Get out, get that shitbox out of here. We want the new one. We got the new one coming. That you must look across the field and go, you're selling a what for what?
Yeah. Well, when I was traveling the Southeast selling filters, I had a choice. At night I could go to a bar, get drunk as a skunk, or I could go to junkyards. So I went to junkyards, and I bought a Brabham BT8 out of a South Carolina junkyard for $2,900. Ex-Denny Holm Tourist Trophy winner, undefeated in under 2-liter racing. No one cared about those cars then. I restored it, and the guy that restored it was a guy named Colin Day, who was a Brit who lived in Daytona. I brought him up here to Jacksonville. I guess the statutes of limitation for the IRS are gone now. I had him in my filter company. And he restored the Brabham, and I raced it for 12 years. A great car. And then I began thinking about the safety of it. You're laying down between two 11-gallon tanks of gas. And then the same junkyard called me. They had a Cooper Ford, and I went up there. It was one of the Shelby King Cobras, $6,000. I mean, That's what the car is sold for. The last time the BT8 sold, I think it sold for $200,000 and went to Japan.
Yeah.
And the thing I find the problem with vintage racing, it's allowed too many people who shouldn't be racing to be racing.
I know. Goodwood. There's like a dentist who's driving a 6-wheel Tyrrell. Who goes through the Marshall stand, and kills the
I was
one
there.
Marshall.
Well, I was there the year. Yeah, at the top of the hill.
Top of the hill, and
Yeah.
he took the other guy, who's a lovely Marshall. His leg got taken off, and you go, you shouldn't have been. That was tough for the drivers, the best drivers of era to drive.
That's right.
Let alone a dentist or whatever it was. I mean, that's where I get nervous because it's weird. We don't seem to have the fatalities or the accidents, or maybe they just don't get reported. But there will be a big one in this stuff at some point.
The one thing I don't like about vintage racing today is many of the cars are new cars. You go to Classic Le Mans, you go to Goodwood, brand new GT40s, brand new. Lola T70s, you know where they're built? Jacksonville, Florida, off Highway 210.
Yeah, okay.
A guy named Mac McClendon. He'll build you a brand new T70. He was building them for Martin Bahrain and sending them over, and Bahrain was putting Lola plates on them and selling them as continuation cars. Now, there is some defense of that. A Lola T70 was one of the early monocoque cars. By the end of 2 seasons, the monocoque was a flexi flyer. I mean, it was dangerous. Yeah. So you had to replace the tub. Well, in the old days, the chassis was the car.
The car, yeah.
Yeah.
So
now you replace the tub, which is essentially the chassis. Now it's a new car.
Yeah.
So from a safety standpoint,
probably the right thing to
do. You're obligated to do it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of redefined it. Now I'm on the committee for Monterey Historics, and we're fighting that battle. When do you allow a replica car to run? And our stand is you don't. Now there are situations like with the Collier's Lancia Formula One car. Mm-hmm. There are none, but they had one built up true to the original one. But it has to be a display run.
Yeah, it can't be the real. What did you a road car comes out of the factory, it has the spec sheet, it goes through, you have the build sheet, you can see they ordered this radio, delete that. It was originally yellow, it was now blue. Very relatively easy. I know there's very dark areas gray areas when records weren't kept on. I know you had to be so diligent about that forensics, and your team did. But when it comes to race cars, I was talking about it with Dan Binks. I've talked about it with many people, Kevin Jeanette, and them. There is no line in the sand with race cars. What are you talking about? Before testing or after testing? You're talking about the setup. You're talking about after we wrecked it and we put new corners on it, or and it doesn't matter whether it's Porsche or whoever. Back in the day, if there was a car sold, they're not going to put the best gear on the car. They're going to put whatever shit they can find out the back of the warehouse, to put on a car to get it out the door.
I've known Carreras have been sold that way.
Exactly.
All the trick parts came off.
All the trick. I mean, it was standard practice. How do you think that must be a massive challenge now with provenance on a race car? Because
on the more sophisticated ones, yeah. I had the old Group 44 TR6. I raced it for 28 years. And the provenance of the line of ownership was easy. Group 44, Paul Newman, me. That's the way it went.
Yeah.
And the car was as it was. Except one thing, I was with Tullius one time, and I just bought the car. I said, we were at dinner at Collier's. I said, hey, I bought your car. No, you didn't. Yeah, it's your car. No. Bob, I got the logbooks and everything. No, you got 2 of my cars. I wrote the nose off at Watkins Glen. Says, look at the firewall. You'll see the weld down there where we put the new front end. Well, that's in period correction, right?
Yeah.
They didn't reclaim that. So I restore the car, and a guy who will be nameless, who lives in West Florida, has a TR6. And it was a Group 44 car, but it was an early car. It wasn't the late car. Late cars were acid dipped, had Mercedes half shafts, had Girling discs and everything. So he painted his car up as a Paul Newman car. And I went over to see him. I said, what's this? Well, this is the Newman car. I said, no, I got the Newman car. Well, we think Paul Newman drove this car. No, Paul Newman didn't drive that car. He wasn't driving when that car was built.
Yeah.
So I had to tell him, I said, look, if people pat you on the head and tell you what a nice guy you are, because you got the Paul Newman car, that's one thing. But if you sell that as a Paul Newman car, it's going to get litigious.
Yeah.
Either from the buyer or from me, one of the two.
Yeah.
So after 28 years, Ray Evernham came up to me to race. He and Tommy Riggins. And they said, we don't want to see you driving this car anymore. I said, why? He said, you got the little tiny bucket seat, like they had in 71. It had a single roll bar. And they said, you need to put a cage in it. You need to put the seat with it. I said, I'm not going to do that.
They said,
You've ruined
stop
the history
driving
of
it.
the car. No, I sold it to Adam Carolla, and he keeps it in his museum.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever driven it.
Probably not. No.
Probably not.
No, but that's the right. It's great when it gets into hands of people that don't need to drive it. He has other cars he can drive, right, and race. He's. I actually like his car collection. I think he's got a wonderful.
Well,
attitude to it,
he has a focus.
He has
Paul
a focus.
Newman.
Paul Newman, that's his thing.
Yeah.
Before we kind of wrap it up, what I was just thinking, all those years of Amelia Island, and you look at the people you've brought in and everything. But if you could put together your ideal panel out of all those great people, alive or dead, if you could have the seminar to end all seminars, and you moderating, who would be that?
It would be really, really, really eclectic.
Would it?
On our panel, we've had Junior Johnson, Mauro Frigeri, just the number. I was going to make a list of them the other day. Roger Penske, Bob Bondurant, John Surtees. The ideal panel, it would be too big to have a panel.
Be too big, yeah.
Yeah. You'd be a good moderator.
I'd moderate it. Yeah, I'd enjoy that.
I always gave that up every year. I wanted to have someone like when we had Jackie Eakes, we had your dad to moderate.
Yeah.
Who much better to do it? I mean, they were there. And what it was, Chuck Dressing said it best. He says, on our seminars, we want to give everybody a backstage pass.
Yeah.
We want them to hear from those who are there, no stories made up. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what the panels were set up to do. And we wanted to have people that no one ever saw very often or knew about. Forgeri was terrific.
I'd love to have heard that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a Cobra versus Ferrari. We had Pete Brock and Bob Bondurant on the Cobra side, and we had Luigi Canetti Jr. and Mauro Frigeri on the other side. And Mauro said, you had an engine to work with. We had to build our engines.
Yes, it was
great lines. The best line was Don Garlett's. And this is a funny, a tragic story that came out good. So I decided I was going to have the 3 greatest drivers ever, living drivers. Richard Petty, stock car. Sterling Moss, sports car. Don Garlett's drag racing. That was the panel.
Is that the picture you had over there?
Yeah.
I saw, yeah.
So a week before, I get a call from Susie. Bill, I got bad news. I said, what? Sterling fell down the elevator shaft and broke his ankles. He can't come. And we've been promoting the 3 greats. And this is the Sunday, and the show is next Sunday. And we needed him on Saturday. So I hung up the phone, and Jane looked at me, and she says, what's wrong? Something's wrong. I said, Sterling fell down an elevator shaft and broke his ankles. How is he? He's all right. Didn't hit his head, broke his ankles, but he can't come. She said, what are you going to do? I said, well, we've been billing this as the 3 greats. So what do? I need someone great, but I can't say you didn't make the first cut.
No, yeah, exactly.
So Carol Shelby and I had a pretty good relationship. Yeah. I called Shell up. I said, Carol, I'm in a real fix. Here's the deal. Sterling fell down, and he was going to be here next week, and he fell down an elevator shaft and broke both his ankles. Can't be there. And we're going to have Don Garlett's and Richard Petty on the stage. Would you fill in for Sterling? He says, first of all, boy, how's Sterling? I said, Sterling's going to be all right. Broken ankles, but he's all right. Okay, when do you need me? I said, Friday. Friday? I said, yeah, 5 days from now. Call me back in an hour. I said, okay. I call him back in an hour. He says, yeah, I'll be there, but here's the deal. I don't fly commercial. I need a plane. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I said, okay. Hung up the phone, called up Rob Meyer.
Yeah.
I said, I need some money to get a plane. What for? And I told him what it was for. Okay, I give you 10 grand. And I called up Rob Moran at Mercedes-Benz. I said, here's our situation. He gave me 10 grand. So then I had 20 grand. I leased a plane. Yeah. Got him over here and back. But in that panel, there were all sorts of questions, and there were two funny ones. One, I tell the guys in the audience who are my mic guys, never, ever,
give the mic.
Never. You give the mic up.
Rookie mistake.
You've given up the dais.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine gives the mic to this weenie in the back of the room and goes, Mr. Shelby. Talk just like that. Mr. Shelby, I thought about putting a Ford engine in an AC, and I built one, and then I did this, and I did that. And I go, oh. And Sam Posey was the
oh, my God.
He was too nice to tell him to shut up.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there with Sam, giving him a microphone,
Yeah.
So finally I get to the point. I said, would you please ask the question? And he says, Mr. Shelby, when did you think of putting a Ford in?
Oh, God.
Shelby looked at us, October. Next question.
Is that what he did? The room must have
Not
laughed.
what year it was. October. Next question.
The room must have exploded.
It did. And everybody knew what that guy was. He was making a fool. It was all about me, right?
Yeah.
So the next one that afternoon, someone asked Garlett something. He says, well, I learned 3 things when I was racing. He says, gasolines for washing parts, alcohols for drinking, and nitromethanes for racing.
That's wonderful.
And
God.
I know he's done it before.
He's done it.
Yeah, that was a good one. That broke everybody up.
That was so fun.
That was a great panel.
Yeah. I tell you, I got people this weekend coming up about the 917 panel. You remember we did the 962. It was 4 years ago when I moderated it with Brian, Dad, Jackie, and Alvin, and people were talking about it this weekend because in what I do, I just love to be the trigger to get people to get going.
You know what to ask.
Yeah, and they get going. And with Dad and David and Brian, it's just, I felt sorry for Alvin because I had to carve a space for him in the airwaves, because he just is not going to override those guys. And, but the other 3, it was one of those moments that you provided in my life that was one of those memories that I'll always have of being there, which was thanks to you. And you've done that for so many people.
We had one other funny one, too. When I remembered that they ran Indy cars at Daytona, but Daytona didn't remember it.
I don't remember.
So I called them up. I said, we're going to do, this was 2009, 50th anniversary Indy cars at Daytona. So they gave us the speedway to use, and all the guys who brought the Indy cars could go, and they were supposed to be paced at 80 miles an hour by Hurley. Well, Hurley takes off at about 120. These guys are back there, white knuckle, hanging on to these 1959 IndyCar roadsters. So we get to the seminar, and I had Jim Rathman, who had won the race, and Johnny Rutherford, and Bobby Unser, to name a few. And some lady asked the question, Johnny Rutherford, I said, what did it cost to run Indy? I mean, what did it take? He said, well, you had to go to A.J. Watson, buy a chassis. That was about $15,000. And then you'd buy an Offenhauser, and that was about another $15,000. You had to have spares. You had to have this. And then, of course, you had to have a spare chassis in case you wrecked or something like that. So he came up with a number. And Rathman, who was sitting here with his head down, kind of looked at me, looked at Rutherford and said, if you weren't such a wall magnet, you wouldn't need all those parts. And then Rathman loved to play practical jokes. Yeah. So I'm getting up there and I'm introducing him, right?
Yeah.
Bobby Unser, Johnny Rutherford, Parnelli Jones, all the guys that ran.
Biggest
in the effort. And I introduced Jim Rathman. He comes down and he sits down. He was getting on in years, and he's sitting there with his head down again. And just before we started, I went and sat down. I forgot who was handling the panel. And Rathman looks up and says, where am I? What am I doing here?
You're like,
and I'm in the front row. I'm going, oh my God, what have I done? And he was just jerking my string.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's just what you need. Oh my God. Well, Bill, I've also got to ask, because I've always wondered, where did your memory come from? Where did
I don't know.
Cause, I mean, did your dad recall things from because you have an uncanny, not singular though. I mean, you've got Chuck Dressing here who has the same thing. You've got people. Brian, for a racing driver, can recall gear ratios from but which, by the way, is not a Bell thing. We can barely remember anything. But you have almost encyclopedia. Yesterday, I had to do your job, pathetically, reading off a list, alternating it with Bill Rothenwald while we name the judges.
Yeah.
And you used to take great pride in all 80 of them in one rep.
123.
123 in one rep. And yes, you had chosen them, so
Yeah, they were friends.
They were
and
friends.
that's what I tell people.
But whether I didn't know, literally 60% of them I was talking about. But I thought that used to be a source of pride. But so where did the memory?
I don't know, because Jane says to me, you can introduce 123 judges without notes, but you don't remember the day the garbage goes out. You know,
That's life. Because you don't care.
and I don't know. Many people would come to. I found out over the last 2 years that was the highlight for some people to come up and watch the introduction.
Yeah, I know.
And it was the thing I worried the most about. When I got to the last name, I said, shows
Well, I
up.
was worried for you. I'm going, if he gets halfway through this is going to be just,
Well, the worst one I had was I had a real battle with cancer. And it was bad.
Yeah.
And I got out 4 days before the Concours, and they didn't want me to go to the Concours.
Which year?
Oh, this was 5 years ago.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going. And then the doctor found out about the introduction. He said, I don't want you doing that. Out in the hot sun. You've lost about 70 pounds.
Oh, jeez.
I look like Abe Lincoln. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. He says, well, what if you collapse? I said, I got 123 friends that'll pick me up.
That's a way to look at it. Wow.
Got to get on. Got to get on with it.
Got to get on.
But I don't know where the memory comes from. I don't know.
Well, you're just fortunate. I mean, it's blessed because I'd have a better career if I could remember anything. But
You know who else does it? Roger Penske.
no, but he's formidable.
Isn't he?
I saw him. Gilles de Ferran told me one day he took him. He's like, they're to test it, Nazareth or something,
Yeah.
and he goes, well, "Have you got your?" He said, "We need to talk about next year's contract or something. Have you got your passport? Why? Because we're going to Luton. We'll take the plane to Luton in London, so we can. I've got the showroom floor's finished, kind of thing. So he gets there and he's going, are those the 18-inch tiles or the 22? Because they look a different shade of color from the. And Gilles's going, how are you knowing this? And everyone's name and everything.
Well, two stories on Roger Penske. I first became aware of him when he was driving. He drove for Brumos in an RSK, then RS60 at Daytona, and I was there in 1960. I was a kid. Roger Penske was 24 years old, and we would see each other at the Detroit Auto Show, for example. He never forgot my name. Bill, how you doing? Hear a lot of good things about Amelia. If I anything I can do for you, let me know. Went on, and then I got diagnosed with cancer, and it was serious. I was in Essen, Germany, and the phone rang about 11 o'clock at night. It said Farmington Hills, Michigan. I said, well, I know some people there, but I don't know who's calling. But I'll take the call. And I answered the phone, and I said, Bill, yeah, Roger Penske, I hear you got cancer. Keith Crane told me you got cancer. I said, yeah. I says, what kind of cancer you got? I said, I got bladder cancer. He says, I had kidney cancer. Who's treating you? I said, Mayo Clinic. He says, well, Mayo Clinic treated me. Give me your doctor's name. I'm having my doctor call your doctor to make sure you get the right treatment because I want you well.
Wow. He said that.
Then when he came down as the honoree, we were Thursday signing posters. He said, Bill, how much do you try to make with your charity here? I said, we try to make $300,000 a year for the various charities, but sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Depends on the weather, the crowd, and everything. He said, how about if I write you a check for $300,000? I said, Roger, you don't have to do that. I said, I don't have to do a lot of things. I want to. So 3 days later, COVID hits. He just bought the Indy Speedway. He just bought the racing series.
Yeah.
So I didn't call him. Merrill Kane from his office calls me. He says, where's our invoice? I said, for what? He says, for $300,000. I said, I'm not going to send Roger a check for $300,000. We got through the show all right. He says, Roger says I'm going to give Bill $300,000. I'm going to give him $300,000. So we get a $300,000 check for our charities. So when I folded the foundation and got out, I had about just under $500,000 to give away. So I called Roger. I said, you've been so kind to me. I've got this money. Tell me your favorite charities and let me write the checks to them. So he said, let me get back to it. He came back and we did Paralyzed American Veterans, did Mayo Clinic, We did hospice. We did spina bifida Jacksonville, which is our charity. But we all did it in his name. You know, check for Roger Penske for Mayo Clinic. Boom. A couple of weeks later, he said, "I got your letter." I said, "Yeah, you didn't have to do that." I said, "Well, I'm like you. I don't have to do everything either." We laughed, and he said, "I'm going to send you another $100,000 for your charities."
Jeez, what a man.
What a man.
What a man.
One of the funny Roger Penske story. It's a famous shot of him with the mini Borgs, black background, and he's sitting in the middle, and he got 17 Borg Warner trophies. Well,
Did you take that one?
no.
No.
But
I love that picture.
they sent that picture down, and I got Nate Derrimer here in town, who's a wizard with Photoshop, to Photoshop the 18th in. We moved his hand out and dropped the 18th trophy in. And they were going for their 18th trophy, and then he was going to be the honoree at Amelia.
Yeah.
So I said, this picture does not get out. It's in my hands. Because if they don't win, I don't want egg on my face.
No, totally.
So Penske wins. The car crosses the finish line. I hit send. Picture comes up with him with 18 trophies. 30 seconds later, he just won the Indy 500. He says, "How'd you do that?"
That's so funny. I love that.
So they called me about 6 months later. Says, "Roger wants to know if we can use that photo because they didn't want to set up to do the other one again." I says, "No, sure, that's fine."
Of course. Wow. Okay, so my last thing is, you've given so much to this car collector world. You're beloved by so many people. You've created experiences for all of us. I mean, really, from the fans, everybody. But what, as you know, the runway's a little shorter now than it was before in front, and you must sit and think about this. And look at where we are now with the fruits of your life here in your beautiful garage. But what has this world given to you, other than material things? I mean, what's it brought to your life as a human?
It's kept me alive. And I not an overly religious guy, but I believe in the Lord, and I believe the Lord looks after you. And in many cases, what your perception of where your life is going is not what eventually it's going to be. You have to be patient. If you do the right things, it'll come your way. And sometimes a decision you want to make and it doesn't go your way, you find out later it was the right decision not to go that way. So you have to place your faith in the fact that your life is going to evolve in a way that the Lord would like your life to evolve. I truly believe that. I know that every time I got in a race car, I would say a prayer to my sister who I lost to cancer, and I just say, keep me safe, make sure I don't make any stupid mistakes, and I don't hurt anybody. And one day I was at Lime Rock, and we had a warm-up in the morning, a 20-minute warm-up. 10 minutes in the warm-up, I get this feeling, put the car away. So I pull in, and my guy was wrenching with me that weekend, came and said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing, I just had this feeling that the race is this afternoon, car's good, no use beating it up, let's put it away." The car I was chasing, which was a Camaro, gets to the uphill portion of Lime Rock, someone's dumped a ton of oil, he goes 6 times end over end, and I would have been with him. Place your faith.
Listen to your heart.
And listen. You won't hear it, but you'll feel it. And when you feel it, do what it tells you to do. Yeah. So, no, my life's been good. I have a wonderful wife of 56 years, 3 great kids. We got a grandchild born spina bifida. That's what's driving me now. Make sure we get enough money to take care of the spina bifida adults and children in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh man, I'd led a blessed life. If it all ended tomorrow, I would have no regrets.
Well, thank you, Bill. That was the way to say it. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Really good.
How about lunch?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back and drive the
Yeah,
Ferrari.
let's do it.
Well, thank you very much for listening or watching Life with Legends. I love doing it. And so don't forget to share the podcast to your friends if you did enjoy it. And thank you so much for your support. Also, remember, visit lifewithlegends.com to catch up on past episodes and check out what I think are some beautiful portraits I've taken of all my guests. Available for sale in limited edition prints. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. I look forward to you joining me again next week.